Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. We've really enjoyed making these an annual tradition at JPM. And our topic tonight is all around, as usual, extending human health span. But today, focused on, beyond weight loss, what's next? What does the future of these type of therapies look like? What does metabolic resilience and healthy aging look like? And once you've solved for weight loss, which is really about preventing disease, right? That's why these drugs get reimbursed. That's why people care. What's the future? How much better can we do with outcomes with complementary mechanisms? And we've got a really stellar panel here today to speak to all of that. So I will let them introduce themselves. Let's start off with 1 to 2 minutes each, and from everybody starting with Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kristen, and great to be here. And I'll try to do this in 30 seconds. So Mark Brzezinski, grew up in Toronto. I'm an MD. I've been in biotech now for 30 plus years. I spent much of that time having founded and building a company called Intercept, where we focused on chronic liver disease, and went, from proverbial bench to bedside, a just discovered molecule that we have ultimately got approved for a disease called PBC, primary biliary cholangitis, and in the process put NASH, now known as MASH, on the map. So really ended up becoming very involved in the metabolic side, and from Intercept went to a company called Versanis. I moved upstream of MASH to the root cause of the problem, obesity, just as the GLP-1s were starting to explode and this whole obesity craze took off. And I was focused there on an orthogonal mechanism, an antibody called bimagrumab that we got out of Novartis, which actually increases, we'll talk about this in the panel, but actually increases muscle mass while dramatically dropping fat. So I started talking to everyone who would listen about quality weight loss when everyone was focused exclusively on what the scale was telling you in quantity. And it was an arms race between Lilly and Novo that's still ongoing, but very much believed in orthogonal mechanisms. And that's when I met you and got involved with BioAge. And very much a believer that we need to move beyond GLP-1s, as great as they are.
Mike Snyder, I'm at Stanford University. I'm a big data researcher, so we study metabolic health and aging quite a bit, amongst other things, and we do very, very deep profiling with the goal of keeping people healthy. I guess some other relevant facts for this panel is I am a type 2 diabetic. I am on GLPs. I do have side effects. We can talk about that if you want. And I spin off companies, 18 over the number of years, and some are doing well, many are doing well.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to be here, and just really honored and excited about a very important topic today. My name, and thank you so much, BioAge, for inviting me. My name is Hanada Youssef. I am a scientist and entrepreneur and the founder of Juvena Therapeutics, which is a clinical stage regenerative medicine company discovering and developing tissue restorative biologics. I have an expertise in the mechanisms underlying tissue degeneration and the biology of aging that I accrued spanning over 2 decades through my discovery research, starting as a PhD student at Berkeley in the labs of Irina Conboy and Dave Schaefer, then a postdoc at Stanford School of Medicine with Tony Wise-Curet, and then the last 9 years as the CEO of Juvena Therapeutics. During this tenure at Juvena, my co-founder, Dr. Jeremy O'Connell, and I really took the company and built it from a platform concept through to having established now a robust pipeline of regenerative biologics for chronic muscle, metabolic, and fibrotic diseases. And excitingly, last year we announced a discovery collaboration with Eli Lilly focused on muscle health and body composition. And we have a lead clinical stage asset, a muscle regenerating fusion protein, which we are completing phase 1 studies for, that in many ways is an insulin for muscle that has broad applicability and can be used to treat multiple types of muscle diseases, ranging from rare dystrophies through to chronic myopathies. And I really can't wait to talk more about the exciting topic today.
Okay, last but not least, I'm Chris O'Donnell. I am a cardiologist. I am currently the head of translational medicine for cardiovascular metabolism at Novartis, based in Cambridge, Mass. I also co-chair the genetics at the BioMedical research program there. Prior to Novartis, I joined Novartis 5 years ago after a long history in academia. I was a professor at Harvard Medical School. I spent nearly 20 years at the Framingham Heart Study and NHLBI as the director of genomics, and I oversaw a lot of the large genome programs in those cohorts, leading to a lot of discoveries of genome-wide associations. Following that time, I was at the VA, the Veterans Administration, as the chief scientist for the Million Veteran Program, a million-person biobank, also involved in the All of Us research program, which I am an advisor for now. And we did a lot of work in genetics and discovered a lot of hits, but really we're not translating it into treatment and prevention of cardiovascular disease, which is the reason that I joined Novartis. I'm super excited about the programs we have using genetics to make discoveries and also to implement into the clinic. So really glad to be here and to talk about this.
Thanks so much, everybody. So we're going to dive right in. The metabolic disease landscape is evolving really rapidly, and one lens you can look at this through is really the lens of acquisitions, like what is pharma betting on for the next complementary mechanisms. And there's been really a lot of activity in the past couple years with Versanis and muscle, with FGF21 from several companies, basically every clinical stage asset taken off the board last year, and most recently, of course, with NLRP3 and Ventyx. So to kick us off, Mark, I'd like to hear from your perspective. This is really like the first sort of muscle takeout. It's an area that, a few of us here have a lot of conviction in. What was Lilly thinking of? What got them excited about this from a patient perspective?
Yeah, so I failed to mention in my introduction that I'm no longer the CEO of Versanis because just as I was hitting my stride there, Lilly saw really the value of lean mass preservation, muscle sparing, and took out the company. So they're now developing bimagrumab. And it was interesting to see them thread the needle because they were this was in the lead up to and through the launch of tirzepatide. And of course, they and Novo were just going at it with each other and telling the world, how great their drugs were. And so it was it was interesting even negotiating, the wording in the press release because there was only so far Lilly was willing to go to concede the fact that as amazing, and by the way, let's all agree that, there's nothing that GLP-1s can't do, it seems, except for maybe Alzheimer's. But there is, there's a well-appreciated downside, which is that starting with semaglutide, a third to 40% of the weight you lose is not fat, it's lean mass, and half of that is muscle. Some of that is obligatory, as your frame, as you downsize, you don't need as much skeletal muscle mass. But unless you're very religious about protein calorie intake and hitting the gym and lifting heavy weights, you're going to lose excess muscle mass. And the moment you stop taking the GLP-1, you're going to rebound and regain fat and not muscle, right? So this is going to prove, I think, to be more and more clinically relevant out there, particularly, in people who are aging and prone to sarcopenia and other subsets of the population. So Lilly absolutely saw that and decided that they wanted to combine bimagrumab, BIMA for short, with tirzepatide. So that's ongoing right now, phase 2 study. And what's cool about that is when you couple BIMA with a GLP-1, you completely abrogate the lean mass loss, right, while deepening the fat loss benefit. So it sounds too good to be true, but I think, that is an orthogonal mechanism. There are others out there that we can talk about. I think that's the next wave. So if we talk, just circling back to to your question about acquisitions, everyone saw the feeding frenzy before the break between Pfizer and Novo and Metsera, where Pfizer came out on top and paid $10 billion for an early clinical stage pipeline of incretins, long-acting, potentially monthly injectables and potentially, also orals. So I do think that there will continue to be appetite in pharma for people trying to get in and win a slice of this unprecedentedly large category. with incretin therapy backbone. But I think more and more you're going to start seeing interest in orthogonal mechanisms.
And Chris, from your seat at Novartis, like when Novartis looks out at the world, what types of mechanisms are they interested in? How do they see the future? Are they different categories, different targets?
I mean, first of all, we're not in obesity right now. We'd love to be, but we're not. It's not. We're not. We are not. No, we're not the Novo Novartis. We're Novartis. But I have to, adding to the comments by Mark, a couple of things about GLP-1s, and they're transformative drugs. There's no doubt about it. But 50% or more people are dropping off them. That's a known fact, and that's just published recently in a big meta-analysis. And on top of that, when you drop off of a GLP-1, your weight goes back up to where it was, and your metabolic derangements go back to where they are. And since I'm in the cardiovascular metabolism side of Novartis, we have a suite of drugs that's focused on lowering LDL, lowering LPA, blood pressure, inflammation, interested in heart failure reduction, and as you all know, all of those are benefited by GLP-1s. But if most people are dropping off them, then are they really drugs that are going to be tractable? So I kind of look at the weight loss field as kind of like the hypertension field. The first wave demonstrated benefit, but they were diuretics, and people don't really like to be on diuretics. So then the next wave, the calcium blockers, the beta blockers, et cetera. And I think the drugs that we're looking for would be drugs that maintain that weight. After you might even stop the GLP-1, you might get on it, and then you might maintain. And then also looking for orthogonal mechanisms that are not the GLP-1 mechanism, that do not have the side effects, for one thing, that the GLP-1s do. And we have a number of ideas that we're working on, but bimagrumab came from Novartis. I think there was a lot of sadness when it left, because it's a really great mechanism and drug, but we're really glad to see that it's still going forward.
Yeah, and then maybe just to kind of add to some of those concepts is just this major concept about the durability of these incretin treatments, right? Where it's game changing in terms of the starvation-induced mechanism, the reduction in caloric intake that leads to fat and rapid muscle and fat loss. But when folks get off, they will eventually gain that weight back, and the body composition changes. And so I think the next generation of therapeutics is really going to be focusing on not just the reduction of caloric intake, but how can we actually increase the output of calories? How can we keep metabolism fast? How can we also keep that weight loss off in a very durable fashion, where folks don't have to, be potentially on incretin treatments for lifelong treatment?
Yeah, so that would argue for basically appetite suppressors, of which there is some interest in. Some things discovered in that, like there's some interesting molecules, LAC-Phe and others, that come out of research that may have benefit in that respect. One side effect that seems to have gotten left off is nausea. And if someone on GLPs, I get nausea when I take them. Not much, but enough there that it's not fun. And I'd prefer not to have that. So I think that makes an argument for other classes of drugs.
I'm curious, Mike, too, because you work a lot from the precision medicine perspective, right? And we're considering all sorts of different complementary mechanisms that are relevant to different patient populations. So what's your view of this space, and what should we be measuring now that we're not, that can help us guide where to treat?
Well, I think we are all different. There are people who are metabolically healthy who are obese. And that's a very interesting category, and we'd like to understand that. And likewise, there are people who are diabetic who are thin. And I think it comes down to subtyping. I think we don't fully understand this. And it's great when you have a drug that helps so many people, which the GLPs do. I think it's fantastic. But there are plenty of people that, they don't help. And there are also people who have, I lose weight, back to the muscle mass. What Mark said was spot on. Even though I lift weights every day, because I want to keep it up, I eat about as much protein as you can imagine, and I'm still losing muscle mass. And I went from 144 weight down to about 128. And you can tell when there's trouble when everybody says, oh, you've lost weight. You don't look very good, basically, is what they're saying. And I thought I looked terrible. So I've actually gone into microdosing to try and back off of that. It helps with the nausea and also helps with other categories. Then on top of that, if you get injured, which happened to me with the bike accident, I couldn't lift weights or certain classes, and suddenly severe muscle mass loss. So we do need alternatives, but backing up a little bit, I think there's so many aspects of metabolic control where there's opportunities. And I mean, the SGLT2 inhibitors are good cases with heart benefits. I think that would be things up in your category, Chris. So there's just enormous opportunity out there. We are a complex homeostatic systems with lots of biochemical pathways, and there's many ways to intervene in this, I think, from many different angles. We can get into that further if you want, but I'll leave it at that for now.
It feels in general like with many of these complementary mechanisms, we're very much at the tip of the iceberg, right? Like you just mentioned, bimagrumab has been around for a while, right? But development was challenging. And so muscle departments in pharma were sort of shut down. They weren't progressed. There's a lot of new targets coming around now, like the inhibi data is really exciting to see, for example. So wondering, Hennady, if you could comment on your partnership and the novel targets that you're looking for?
Oh, yeah, of course. And then there's also just like another thought I wanted to share in terms of what I also think is going to be so important is just this concept of really collecting over time longitudinal data, right? Where we don't want unhealthy, metabolic impairments, obesity with aging to simply be replaced over time with a chronic epidemic of sarcopenia, especially for older individuals that are a little bit more sensitive to that muscle loss. And then if they're going on and off the incretins, they can actually become, kind of like skinny, but still have the sarcopenic obesity, fat, skinny kind of phenotype. And so what's really exciting about our partnership with Eli Lilly is they really appreciate Juvena's regenerative approach, meaning our ability to leverage our Juvenet AI-driven discovery platform to map protein secreted by stem cells to muscle tissue in a manner in which we're identifying novel targets and factors that aren't just preventing protein degradation or lean mass bulk up, but is actually enhancing muscle metabolism, muscle energetics, muscle health in a way that could be over time incredibly durable longitudinally when combined with the incretins or even as standalone therapies.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just going to say that another aspect here that's a challenge in developing particularly muscle-sparing agents where you're really driving for quality weight loss. And we came, this was a big challenge in convincing investors and other companies, frankly, at the time to really buy into the story that we were telling is that from a regulatory standpoint, to get a weight loss drug approved, you've got to lose weight, right? And it's pretty clear in the FDA guidance what's required. You need a placebo-adjusted minimum 5% delta, and frankly, investors and other stakeholders are expecting far more than that, right? But of course, if you have a drug that's lean mass sparing, right, that's a headwind in terms of what the scale is telling you. You're actually, for some of these drugs, for the first few weeks or months, you're actually gaining weight, right, because you're gaining muscle mass. Now, eventually, most of these MOAs, you'll plateau, which is good because you don't want to become, Arnold Schwarzenegger necessarily in his prime. But nevertheless, that's a headwind, if you will, if you're really going for a weight loss endpoint. So FDA's got to catch up in their latest updated guidance. They opened the door a little bit to consider alternative endpoints in the future for body composition type drugs, acknowledging this as an issue, but they're not there yet, right? So with bimagrumab, it wasn't an issue because, there's so much fat loss, at least after a year or so, that, even as a monotherapy, you could overcome, right, and get that minimum 5% threshold. But for other MOAs, not necessarily, like inhibi, the WAVE data, at least based on single dose, I think they lost a little bit, or maybe they were neutral on weight, but they gained muscle and lost fat.
Yep. Yeah, I really couldn't agree more that it's almost like a shame. It's so frustrating for the entire aging and health span field, but especially now in the next generation of obesity therapeutics, that the FDA has not caught up, right? It is just weight on a scale that they're looking for, and that literally pounds of weight loss. And that actually blocks a lot of great therapeutic candidates that specifically target muscle, that actually enhance muscle metabolism, and over time will be much better for you for an improved body composition, where you're not going to get, you're not going to sort of switch obesity for sarcopenia over time. And so I do think that over time, with the data and just seeing and watching people on these incretins, the regulatory will catch up because they're going to have to from the longitudinal data that we're going to start to see over the next decade.
This might be a stretch, but I mean, in the drugs that like inhibi that preserve muscle, if they are also going to preserve the metabolic benefits, then they're a great complement to the many cardiovascular, cardiometabolic drugs that also lower risk and could be exactly what we're looking for, that is maintaining weight and not gaining weight, maintaining muscle, and then can be combined with, let's say, inclisiran is one of our drugs that lowers LDL, or anti-inflammatories, or other drugs that lower blood pressure, et cetera, that are long-acting and preventive. So that's the aspiration, but I do agree that's going to require evidence. It's going to require money to be put into trials to
Large
demonstrate
trials.
that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's already come up that this is just so important with aging especially, right? Which is not a small subset of the population. And older people, as we've touched on, when they lose weight for any reason, including incretins, they lose too much muscle. And then, of course, they gain too much fat when they gain weight. And so going on and off these drugs, we don't really know what's going to happen, right? I mean, so do you think that there's more reason to be hopeful looking at sarcopenic obesity or particular subsets, or is that sort of equally difficult with FDA, with what you've seen so far? Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be to actually stratify the population and look at older individuals on the incretins will probably be the way that we're able to actually see the deltas in muscle functional metrics like grip strength, walking speed, getting out, walking upstairs, things like that really matter for older individuals. And it's also because muscle ages, right? Like when you're younger, we even see that in mice, right? Younger mice, they'll lose that muscle, but the grip strength, their strength, their treadmill performance, you just can't measure. It's really hard to measure that delta of decline. But you do see that in the older animals because of just the biology of muscle aging. So I do think that will be a great way to actually start to incorporate functional metrics into smaller populations of more homogeneous elderly individuals.
It would be nice if they were more comprehensive than just grip strength. That's the problem. People train themselves to be good, but if they know they're going to get this as their task, then they go in.
Metrics,
Yeah, so I think we do need, and I think, now here I'm a measurement guy. I'm a believer in whole body MRIs where you can really get a lot of information, not just about muscle, but fat. Actually, fibrosis, all kinds of things, ejection fraction from your heart. And so I'm a big believer in comprehensive measuring, and I do agree that we need, we really should have lean mass measurements as a routine measurement as opposed to BMI, which is a standard, but that's been very hard to change, right? Even the diabetes field still leans, and obesity field leans on BMI, which everybody agrees is a very, very terrible metric. Yet that's what's out there. And so I think we need more lobbying, quite frankly, for proper measurements. Yeah. And my own view is we need more comprehensive measurement programs so we can look at people in their holistic way so we can really see what's going on and then prescribe the right treatments for the right people and really be assessing people properly. You were going to say, Mark?
Yeah, no, I think that's all spot on. As a practical point, though, from a drug development standpoint, you can do what you're saying in phase 2. You can put everyone through a scanner and really very precisely assess body composition. But in much larger phase 3 trials, that's just not practical. And historically, and a reason that Novartis ultimately gave up bimagrumab after putting it through 21 clinical studies in a range of muscle wasting diseases, is that the standard on anything muscle related is gain of function, right? Gain of strength, power, which is extraordinarily difficult to demonstrate, even in a large study. You need a large population over a long period of time in a very well controlled setting. So it's difficult. You can demonstrate trends and sit to stand, grip strength, 6-minute walk, but a lot of failures have resulted from these functional endpoints. And so there's got to be a better way, an accessible endpoint that's non-invasive, that's cheap to assess and doesn't set such a high bar. So anyway, I'm preaching to the choir here, but really, if there are no FDA colleagues, and Macri was here, and he's supposedly making drug development easier for all of us, but we'll see. Luke might have something to say about that. No.
Great. Well, let's move on to a different category that's also important in obesity, important in aging, which is really inflammation. And of course, in cardiovascular disease, right? So Chris, if you could comment on that. I know you guys have an IL-6 inhibitor, right? You think about inflammation as key in many different diseases. How do you think of that space?
I mean, obviously, inflammation, obesity is associated with inflammation,
That's
so
right.
we note that
Yeah.
with great interest. Novartis published the CANTOS trial, which really was the first large-scale demonstration that lowering of CRP and IL-6 lowers risk and reduces hard outcomes in patients who have cardiovascular disease and a high sensitivity CRP. And that was, I think, a really seminal study and really set the field forward. Unfortunately, for various, I guess, commercial reasons, canakinumab was not labeled for use for prevention of cardiovascular disease. I do note that there was a higher infection rate in those treated with canakinumab, and I think that was a little bit of a concern. However, fast forward to when I joined the company, and I don't take credit for this, but we now have 3 bullets in the chamber. We have interest in the IL-1 beta inhibition, which canakinumab did, and we have interest in following up on that. We have the acquisition of Tourmaline, which is a company that has generated an IL-6 monoclonal antibody that lowers IL-6 and is slated for a later phase trial to show event rates lowered in use of this monoclonal antibody. And then we're interested in NLRP3 inhibition, which we just completed 2 small phase 2A trials. They're in clinicaltrials.gov, so I can talk a little bit about this, that they were using this NLRP3 inhibitor, DFV-890, an oral agent, that in patients with prior coronary disease and either high sensitivity CRP or another cohort that has CHIP or clonal hematopoiesis of indeterminate potential, in both of those cohorts, there was significant lowering of both IL-6 and high sensitivity CRP, comparable or better than canakinumab in these small little cohorts, giving us a lot of confidence that this is a possible avenue forward for prevention as well, and we can talk more about NLRP3 inhibition. So we're really interested and excited in the potential use in ASCVD, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. The question we can talk about is whether there is a use in patients who don't have overt ASCVD, and love to talk about it, and I won't
More
dominate
prevention?
anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very relevant to the aging case here, right? I mean, IL-6 and IL-1 beta drugs have been used in a variety of different indications. We've been motivated at BioAge because, of course, just as in obesity, inflammation goes up with age, not only in the periphery, but also in the brain. And that seems to be relevant to a whole host of different diseases. So yeah, I would love some more color on how you're thinking about indications beyond sort of ASCVD.
I mean, I can say that we're focusing initially on we would be focusing on ASCVD. I know other parts of the company, like the neurology, is very interested in potential for brain and lowering of inflammation. So I would say that we're starting from that position. Personally, I do see that there could be a use in potentially patients who are at high risk but don't have overt disease. Let's say, then this is just my personal opinion, it's not necessarily something we're doing, but using cardiac imaging like coronary artery calcium or CT angiography to look for plaque in patients who also have a high sensitivity CRP level and maybe even a high risk with LDL or the like. That would seem to me like an ideal population to think about. That's not one that has overt disease. So, that's where I'd like to see the field going.
Yeah.
I would also comment that there are certain vascular conditions like abdominal aortic aneurysm, like aortic valve stenosis that are very highly associated with IL-6. So that's another potential for these types of drugs.
It's really just I feel like in the field of aging biology, it really speaks to that concept of inflammaging, right? And systemic inflammation, where it's so important not to just treat the symptoms and maybe the targets or cytokines that are upregulated, but to really better understand why is it that we're getting all this inflammation that's associated with obesity. And this is actually coming not just from the heart, but from organ systems and endocrine systems like muscle, like adipose tissue, like the liver. And when these organ systems become more fibrotic, when they become more infiltrated with immune cells, they will actually start going from secreting healthy regenerative factors like myokines to inflammatory cytokines. The cells become senescent. So I do think that it really holistically actually targeting inflammation and these systemic pathways could lead to overall improvements in metabolic regeneration and overall metabolism and healthy aging.
Yes, maybe switching a bit to what we do, which is actually profiling people while they're healthy on the prevention side, as you two were saying. So we do deep measurements on people longitudinally. We've been running a study now for about 16 years on this. And what we find is that we're tracking how people age, basically, and everybody ages differently. Some people are cardio agers, others metabolic, some people are immune, and many people are all of the above. So you can actually track, and I do think this is where the world will move. I don't know, how many of you have done true diagnostics? Really? Oh, that's terrible. How many of you have done, that one, I'm not conflict. Here I'm conflict. How many of you have done IOLO? Oh, another one. All right. Well, at least one person. All right, there I'm conflict. Anyway, there are these aging tests you can do, right? And you can see how you're aging. And certainly my company will tell you your ageotype, your aging pattern. And there, if you've seen 20 score, I still talk about these sorts of things too. So the idea is that we all have different aging patterns and we would match our lifestyle and a drug around these things. And of course, BioAge is big on this. So, and I think it's very doable. And as we switch into prevention, we will all want to operate in this field. And I think if you're a cardio ager, you would want to take the appropriate lifestyle or interventions to do this stuff. And I think, again, if it's very, very well with diabetes, again, which I know a lot about, we subtype diabetes into its subtypes, muscle resistant beta cell defects, which is what I have. And how you respond to both your lifestyle and the drug depends on your subtype. So for example, if you're muscle resistant, you will be a potato and a pasta spiker, believe it or not. And if you're Asian, you're more likely to spike the white rice than if you're non-Asian. Go figure that one out. So the point is there's a lot of personal characteristics associated with not so good healthy outcomes, so to speak. And I think we can actually personalize our lifestyle and our drug interventions to be able to better do this. But you do have to know what your subtype is and track it to see what's going on. I do think, again, maybe we're getting too futuristic, but I do think that is the future.
Are there big categories that emerge? Like if you look at, we talked about inflammation, we talked about metabolism and muscle, right? Are there any other major categories that stand out to you when you do this sort of?
Yeah, oxidative stresses, sarcopenia. So we actually, again, profile people over time, and we noticed that there's actually two bursts where there are big changes. One, don't take this too seriously, are 44-ish, so people in the 40s. One at 60, which we did expect. That's been well known. Sarcopenia, all these things. We see all that, along with oxidative stress, loss of kidney function, things right up your alley. So a bigger burst in 60s, a lot serious immune decline, actually. That probably is underlying a lot of these conditions. In the 40s, it's some muscle and skin as well. We did see lipid metabolism shifts pretty big time in the 40s, actually, which sort of fits with people's fat distribution changing and coming back to the earlier topic. So we do see that, and interestingly, you can think about this when you're out there tonight, but alcohol metabolism and caffeine metabolism also shifted.
Improves, right?
Well,
If only.
yeah, it depends how you want to look at it. For most people, they become more sensitive to caffeine than alcohol. So,
Any gender differences?
we haven't broken that down, but for sure there are with menopause, of course. Yeah, that our study was kind of small, so we separated that out. Yeah. So there's lots of changes, but they do occur at different times, and they do occur differently in different people, in spite of the generalizations I made. Yeah. So I think we want to know those in an individual fashion, so ultimately we can personalize our treatments for people, both lifestyle and drugs.
So yeah, from my seat at BioAge, it's been really exciting to watch this sort of shift towards really prevention rather than treatment, and pharma talking about like healthy aging as a goal, I think Novartis is a nice example there too, because you have the DARE division, Diseases of Aging and Regenerative Medicine, focused on, well, amongst other things, exercise mimetics. We work with you on that, but we'd love to hear your perspective on like what you guys are looking for from aging biology, where you think it can be applied, along your traditional indications.
Yeah, so I'm here kind of representing DARE, even though the Diseases of Aging and Regeneration, even though I'm not a member, but I've been an advisor of the a great collaboration with BioAge, and it's based on a lot of what I did prior to coming to Novartis, which was kind of data science in very well phenotyped populations that are followed longitudinally, and to look for genetic and proteomic and other kinds of biomarker associations that may identify targets. And I think the exercise area is one that's sort of understudied in terms of, could we discover targets that are predicting optimal exercise or fitness. It's actually not an easy thing to do, but some of the cohorts that we're working on with BioAge are really fit for purpose for that kind of research. Of course, muscle sparing is something of interest. So I think we're not looking for some sort of like magic bullet of aging. It's really focused on the kind of things we've been talking about throughout this panel, which really are relevant to weight loss with the preservation of muscle fitness, of muscle mass, and that kind of thing. And ideally complementary to our cardiovascular and metabolic portfolio, which, as I said, is a really substantive one, and we want to basically make this available to patients, not just for the muscle preservation and exercise, but also for the cardiovascular and cardiometabolic, and I'd say neuroscience as well benefits.
And I'd definitely say too, just with like the excitement of exercise mimetics, it's not that we want to necessarily like replace exercise. It's just that there's so many older individuals, and I really saw that with my father in his last years of life, where you just get to a point where it's like your knees are just not the way that they used to be. You're incredibly frail. You may have had an injury, and so your body isn't just simply able to benefit from the opportunities of exercise. And so I really do think that these mimetics that you're developing are going to be game-changing for folks that just don't have that mobility and opportunity.
If I can just add, one particular population which we're all going to be at some point, which is heart failure, and particularly heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. It's an obesogenic type of heart failure, and we see a lot of frailty with that elder population that has heart failure. And wouldn't it be great to have an exercise mimetic, and of course drugs that preserve muscle mass?
Yep.
Yeah.
So 2 comments. I think it's a bit of a myth to tell people to back off on certain situations. As someone who, I was a runner, and I'm not getting a little personal, but when I got out of bed, my knees were hurting. I hobbled down the stairs. I shifted from running to weightlifting, actually, to try and get better glucose control. It failed because of the way I'm diabetic. But actually, it totally improved my knees and everything, because you can do compensatory ways of improving things, which I don't think people realize. They do. I'm probably in the wrong panel for this, but I don't think you solve everything with drugs. Yeah. I think you can do things, and it's amazing. After a month of lifting weights, suddenly it all went away. Yeah. And it's counterintuitive, right? You're carrying all these heavy weights, and you're going up because you're building strength. And I think we actually do need programs that will actually take advantage of that better, where we can. So the last thing you should be telling, your 80-year grandfather is, when he's sitting around, take it easy, Grandpa. You should actually get up off that chair and schlep around. Because people are active in their later years, right? They're the ones who live a long time.
If you misunderstood me on that, as a preventive cardiologist, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and
It's hard though, right? Like the body's response to exercise also isn't the same with age. It's muted.
What's that again?
The body's response to exercise also declines.
Yeah, it does, and I think you've got to counter that. I think we do, and then, I think the drugs can augment all this stuff, but I do think, how are you going to get better blood flow by a drug? It's not going to happen. And blood flow, your microvascular system is very, very important. Obviously, there are drugs that help that. Maybe that's a good area of the future, which I think is very understudied, actually.
Well, and then maybe tying it actually back to obesity is, with exercise mimetics, it really brings to mind this concept around alternative mechanisms for weight loss, including things like energy expenditure. Right, and so with the incretins, they've been so great at really curbing appetite, actually slowing down metabolism. But I think that the next sort of generation of therapeutics, including some of the preclinical candidates that Juven is discovering and developing through its platform, involve actually enhancing energy expenditure, caloric output, as well as lipolysis. And that, I think, is going to be such a complementary way and approach of creating durable weight loss through metabolic rejuvenation.
All right, we're going to do one more final question, then open it up to a few questions from the audience. So just to wrap it up, let's go through everybody. And like, what are you excited about in the next 12 to 18 months? What clinical readout, what data, what approval? What should we be looking out for? Mark.
BioAge's NLRP3 readout. Did I say the right thing? No, it's a great target, and we're pandering. No, what I'm excited about is to see, just to your point about energy expenditure. I happened to catch up with the head of R&D at a large pharma last night. We were talking about obesity, the obesity space, and he was, very clear. If you know of anything that can improve energy expenditure without suppressing appetite, that is our focus going forward in the obesity space. I think that we alluded to it before. I mean, the popular hype, the influencer hype around aging and Healthspan converging with this explosion, of opportunity in the pharmaceutical space with the GLP-1s, it's really converged in a beneficial way to drive a huge increase in resources across, biotech and pharma. Looking at a next wave of mechanisms that can address not just obesity, but obesity-adjacent morbidities broadly, right, that we've been talking about as a panel. So this is really just an amazing age of innovation. And as I said at the outset, I think, we will probably see a few more incretin deals out there just because everyone's got to have the shiny object, right, that's working for Novo, Lilly, and et cetera. But I do think that we're going to start seeing a lot more focus on novel, new mechanisms, right, that address the liabilities that we've been talking about and really get at health span, right? And I fully agree with you that it's not all about drugs. We've got to always, as physicians, we always stress to our patients, right, it's for, diet and lifestyle, right? And you can make major changes no matter how old you are, right? Getting into the gym, starting to lift heavy objects, does make a difference.
Maybe to add to that, I agree with everything you said. I am keen on prevention and trying to do that through both lifestyle and I'm not anti-drug. I actually believe in drugs. I'm taking them for my diabetes. And I'm also keen on measurement science, that we can measure people at a level that's never been possible and therefore take more responsibility for our health. So try to keep people healthy in this issue about extending health span, which I think is really underserved in today's medical world. And I think we should be pushing that. People should want to live long, healthy lives and not just be feeble their last decade of life. That's just not useful for anyone. And I think in the area of mental health, we haven't talked about that as much, but I think that's an area of incredible opportunity with most drugs failing in that space by a lot. So there's huge opportunity there. And actually diet of all things seems to be working well for certain things like bipolar, which is pretty amazing. I wouldn't lose track of the fact that half the people die of cardiovascular disease, back to your point. So there's a lot of opportunity there in my mind. I'm actually going through more than one thing. I better pass it on. So go ahead, on to you. I don't want to steal Chris's
Should we talk about cancer too?
That's the other half.
Yeah, and I really think we're seeing it already, and it's just more of this kind of shift towards the quality and durability of weight loss, and the FDA becoming, and other regulatory agencies opening the doors towards more functional metrics, so going beyond just weight loss and the amount of weight to really that quality, that durability, and the functionality of your healthy metabolism.
I'm going to wrap it up with two trial readouts that I think we should be looking for, and one general concept that feeds on everything. One of them is our pelacarsen trial in Novartis. This is a antisense oligonucleotides that's lowering Lp(a), which right now we do not know, is that a real risk factor or not. So we will prove that this will be proof of concept and also demonstration of a drug that could actually lower an entirely new risk factor. So that's one. Number two is one that we're not doing, which is the Novo Nordisk Zeus trial, which is an IL-6 monoclonal antibody that will really be the second big trial after CANTOS, demonstrating that inflammation lowering lowers risk. That readout, I believe, is this year, so that will be a very important trial for all of us interested in this area. But I think the one thing that I think generally captures a lot of what we're talking about is this amazing era of, as you said, innovation and data science, but using large population cohorts that are millions and millions in size, that are genetically profiled, and then AI. I mean, you have to say it, but AI and the use of newer methods to bring all this together, I mean, we're seeing it in real time. It's really changing the way. There's no turning back. You know, it's like the iPhones, we all have them in our pockets now, right? That's what AI is doing for us. So I think I'm very excited to see where that goes and really excited to be part of this whole field.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Let's thank the panelists. And we'll take a few audience questions, too.
Thanks very much. Dave Reisinger from Leerink Partners. Thank you for hosting this panel, Kristen. Super enlightening. I'm curious if you could just provide a little bit of a look forward, right? Since the FDA hasn't, moved on the notion of quality of muscle or even measuring it. Is there anything to look forward to in the next year or so? I mean, are there any things on the docket? Any sense for when the FDA will decide what endpoint it prefers for measuring muscle function? There's a lot of debate over grip strength, versus stair climb power. And obviously the FDA hasn't made any declarations on what it prefers. So if you could just maybe share some thoughts on potentially what to watch and when.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is who knows, but I'll tell you the experience that we had at Versanis, because we went in there arguing two main points with our MOA. One was that BMI sucks, right, as you pointed out, and waist circumference is a much.
And everybody knows it too. That's what's
And everyone
so
knows it,
crazy.
right? And they know it, and we argued for waist circumference as a primary endpoint, and they said no. But they did leave the door open, if we could provide more evidence, right, in a phase 2 study correlating waist circumference with BMI, with other measures, they might in the future be more open-minded. Second, and more specific to your question, we were doing in this large phase 2b study, we were doing DEXAs on everyone, and we were also doing what are the scales called?
Embody.
Yeah, embody.
Yeah, where you get
embody.
the
Where
measurements of fat.
Yeah, that are pretty good at this point. But we got the concession number one, that we could get body composition into our label in the future as a supportive endpoint. So not as a primary endpoint, but as a supportive endpoint. And two, if we could again demonstrate and validate ultimately that DEXA, that the scale was as good or close to as good as DEXA, that maybe in a phase 3 trial they'd accept that. So there is an openness there, and then as I mentioned earlier in the most recent updated draft guidance, they acknowledge the issue and leave the door open for future consideration of other endpoints. So I think we just need to drive that.
So I had a, I guess, somewhat speculative question on a similar vein, which is, we all love to complain about endpoints, particularly in things like you look at neuro, right? There are near-term things which you can observe that never show up in FDA endpoints. So the conversation is happening about what if FDA radically changes approval and separates out efficacy from safety. I'm curious which would flip the card up entirely. I don't know if you guys have given any thought to that, and how would that change this dynamic? Good, bad, otherwise.
Sorry, it's changed the endpoint for what? For obesity?
Oh, no, just in general, right? So this concept, Jim O'Neill has years ago talked about saying that we should be able to sell after you have a safety approval, right? And then sometimes efficacy would happen late, presumably, I don't know.
Like saving functional benefit for phase 4.
Correct, right. And so if you're able to get things approved on safety, like, does that change everything? Can you come up with the endpoints that actually functionally matter?
So,
Yeah. Is the FDA holding this back?
well, so I'd say that, look, the Subpart H pathway, which has been around since the 90s, right, or also known as the accelerated approval pathway, somewhat, addresses the issue you just raised, right, where, if you can identify a surrogate endpoint that is reasonably likely to predict clinical benefit down the road, that is acceptable, as a basis for accelerated approval, so long as you as a sponsor, as a company, commit to conducting an clinical outcomes study, right, that you conduct and ultimately complete on a post-marketing basis for full approval, right? Or if you don't prove it, otherwise your product comes off the market. You do with the surrogate has to be an efficacy readout, right? So it's not just safety, but that exists, that pathway exists, and I think the agency has said that they are willing to expand the use of surrogate endpoints. We were the first at my earlier company, Intercept. I think we were the first to get acceptance of a surrogate endpoint in the context of a chronic liver disease, slow-moving liver disease, as opposed to its typical application in oncology and viral infectious disease. But we need, as an industry, to keep pushing that to get drugs to patients sooner.
And I would say, like, I wish we could do that for muscle drugs in particular, because Juvena and I know BioAge and other companies have actually come up with these very kind of more complex diagnostic panels, right, of lots of plasma factors that are actually really associated with improvements in strength and function over time. And so it's like, theoretically, if we can get approval on that, then it would make it so much easier over a few years to actually see those big deltas in functional metrics that you can't really see sometimes in shorter clinical studies.
Yeah, we especially need those in the resilience field and longevity field. You can't wait 20 years for an endpoint. You do need these surrogates. And there is a lot of push. There actually, ARP-H has several programs out there to actually push in this space. So.
Hi, Ali from Multi Therapeutics. I'm just curious, I want to ask a really basic question. What do you think is more of a significant factor to increase lifespan? Increasing weight loss or increasing muscle mass?
I mean, maybe we'll all have different opinions. I think it's not about muscle mass. I think it's muscle function, right? I think if we can really, Juvena's thesis has always been, muscle is one of the largest organ system. It's an endocrine organ. It's associated with all-cause mortality. And if we can rejuvenate muscle, that rejuvenated muscle is going to make your heart better and your lung better and your brain better. And so, I would say I would choose muscle personally, but that's my opinion.
It's probably contextual. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I might say weight loss. I mean, and it's based in part on genetics, because we looked at genome-wide PheWAS, GWAS, and with Mendelian randomization. Now, granted, those are looking at BMI, which also involves muscle as well as weight, but the associated benefits of lowering BMI are indisputable with weight loss. So, but the muscle piece, I mean, is terribly important as well. So
It's all about your starting point, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it's
not
contextual.
relevant.
I think if if you're overweight or obese, then obviously losing weight counts. Yeah. But you definitely need muscle mass. If you look at people with the blue zone, it's right. Their number one factor is they're all very active. They move a lot. So that's clearly an important parameter. So
I mean, muscle loss with age is universal, right? And that's like the number one predictor of loss of independence, and
And as soon as people lose their mobility, their health declines. Yeah.
All right.
You're hearing a mixed opinion. It was a great question.
With that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks.